Good morning, everybody. Well, I mean, farmers are not quiet people. So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My job here is very simple, just to talk about synopsis of agriculture in Nigeria. So, basically, I'll just be taking us through what's happening really in Nigeria. What are the challenges with agriculture? So, but first, I should tell you about myself. I'm not exactly a practicing farmer. Let me put it that way. I have 2 degrees in agriculture. I actually trained as a breeder. But I found myself in banking. I'll talk more about that when I make my presentation. And I was in banking for like 22 years. But when I went into banking, it was for agricultural financing. And then I went to every area of banking. I ended up my career as a group head for agriculture in the bank. Right now I run my own consulting firm, and one of the things I do is agricultural advisory, agricultural business plan, feasibility studies, project management for agriculture for banks who are lending into agriculture. That's basically what I do. It's also enable me to have some interaction with people, with policies, multilateral agencies, and interaction with farmers. So in talking, I'll probably share some of my own little experience. I know there are well-experienced people here, so don't mind my little experience. Thank you very much. So, what are the key issues in agriculture today? Agriculture is central to Nigerian economy. I think it's central to every economy. Because if I should ask this question, who in the last 1 week just decided not to eat? Not that you're fasting, we just don't like food. I'm sure there's nobody like that. If there is, I would like to be the person. We need food. So agriculture is central as well as it's, I mean, they talk about food security. Without food security, there can't be a stable economy. Whether we like it or not. If people are hungry, that's why we have crises all over the country. If people have enough food to eat, they won't be thinking of bombing other people. Now, agriculture accounts for 40% of our gross domestic product. That was before rebasing. I don't know what it is after rebasing, but we'll take the 40%. And every time I've asked people, can you tell me how much you spend on food on a monthly basis from your income? Actually, averages between 30 to 40%. Does that explain why 40% is GDP? I think it does to some extent. But it also provides 60 to 70% of employment in Nigeria. I mean, you see some data say 60, some data say 70, which is it. But let's say we take 60. Isn't it worrisome that 60% of us cannot feed 100% of us? That's a major challenge. Also, only 38 million hectares of the 82 million hectares we have is under cultivation. Now, that 38 million, if we break it down, you see that a lot of it are also idle, because out of this 60% that we're talking about, 90% of them are small-scale farmers who practice shifting cultivation. So, if we could break it down, we might discover that we don't actually have 38 million hectares under cultivation, but that's what the data that we have. Also, FAO says soil quality is low. It's low to medium in Nigeria. I will come back to talk about soil quality. And then we represent 1% of export. 40% of GDP, 1% of export. What do we export? Just cash crops, the cocoa, the rubber, the cashew, the sisal. So not real food. That means that everything we produce locally, we consume. And we don't even have enough. The 1.1 trillion was spent importing food items in Nigeria last year. It's better. The year before it was 2 trillion. So there's so much issues that we need to deal with in agriculture. What are the things that actually characteristics of agriculture in Nigeria? It's cyclical performance because of the gestation period. It's seasonal in production. I mean, right now, everywhere is quiet. In the next 2 months, you're going to see green corn all over the place, either in boiled form or roasted form. Nigeria is the largest producer of green corn in the world because we eat it green. Most other countries, they take it brown and for milling, but we consume whatever we produce. I mean, the large-scale farmers do produce for milling, but we'll talk more. But I'll still come back to that. It is highly capital intensive. The average farmer, the 60% really can't afford to really mechanize their own farms. And then it is dependent on weather. With rainy season. When it's dry season, nothing happens. Can we really sustain ourselves? And that's really part of our challenge as a country, that even from feasibility studies, one single crop of a farm who's producing maize cannot be profitable with just one single crop. You need to have at least two to be profitable. So how does irrigation play in our farming system? And then farm lands is mostly on lease. People, we are very emotional about land here. It's my family land. We don't sell land in our family. So farmers have to lease, and then the day the family needs the land, the farmer is in trouble. And then you people exploit them. Every year you increase the rent. So it's those characteristics we have. So what are the challenges? One, it is characterized by low productivity to use of primitive implements. Our farmers, the 60%, the core 60% still use hoes, cutlasses. There's very little you can do with that. There's poor technology. Poor technology, not in terms of, the big farms have the technology, they have all the harvesters and the machines. But how do we get our farmers to use adaptable technology? That's a big challenge. Our agricultural engineers, what are they doing? How do we develop things that will work for the farmers? I remember when I was in the university, there was one of our professors who was working on a planter, and the planter works like an umbrella. The farmer walks, and as he walks, he releases, he puts seeds in a container inside and as you walk, he releases it and he digs the soil and drops in there. Things that will make life easy for the farmer. They might not be fantastic, but we have those technologies that they can use, and are they affordable? Also, cultural practices, we have that challenge, especially, but I guess that will wear out with the aging of the core farmers. That's a big challenge we have. The real core farmers are aging. They have those cultural practices. The story of yellow maize in Nigeria, it was rejected. How do you drink yellow pap? It doesn't work. Pap is white. But the yellow maize is more nutritious than the white. But so you have all those cultural practices that we need to break. Also, then soil quality. I said I was going to talk about soil quality. FAO says that soil quality is low to medium. And it's true. If you look at here, our soil quality, as the top soil in Nigeria is between 12 inches to 18 inches deep. So by the time you plow 1, 2, 3 times an arrow, lost quality. Significantly. And that's why the local farmers understood that they were doing shifting cultivation. We try to improve it by talking to them about crop rotation. That big challenge. In the temperate countries, the topsoil is 1 meter deep. So you can continue to plow, and then there's winter that helps to preserve the soil. We don't have that here. So it's a major challenge that we need to deal with. Ground research and development activities. I'm not sure what the research is doing. I believe that the funding they get just pay salaries and very little to do anything. Let me explain this to you. Because I trained as a breeder, my first degree I worked on genetics of maize colors. And in my second degree, I worked on biotechnology, in vitro culture of sorghum. It was a pilot study in Africa. Prior to that stage, it was only in Japan and America that they had done in vitro study on sorghum. It was a breakthrough for us because African varieties that we used, none of them responded to in vitro culture and grew in the lab. When we moved to the field, we didn't do too well. But we could explain that for various reasons. With more trial, we get response. But the fact that we had that result, instead that for me, I'm always challenged about solutions. What came to my mind is, we have a problem with striga and sorghum and soya beans. Can we use in vitro culture or biotechnology to solve the striga problem? So I started doing proposals. I started talking to research institutes in Nigeria. Everybody said, oh, we like what you're doing, but we don't have a budget. We like what you're doing, but we don't have a budget. That's how I ended up in banking. Because I couldn't get a job. And it was 1989. This is 25 years after. The striker problem is still there. So it means that there's very little funding for research. How can we develop if there's no research? Not just in terms of crops, but in every area of agriculture, down to mechanization. We need to put money into research. And there's under-financing of agricultural value chain. The banks will give money to the Olams and the Chi, but the average farmer really can't get funding because it can't provide the collateral, doesn't have the requirements that the banks need. That is a major challenge because either we like it or not, the big farmers actually produce either for export or for processing. So the real farmers are the ones that produce what we eat. And if they don't have funding to expand their production, we'll continue to import food. That is the reality that is on ground. This Natural Agricultural Land Development Authority, this was supposed to look at how do we get farmers to have land, create land. Now we say we have 82 million hectares. I don't even have to do the mathematics. If you try to find the percentage, you won't get 1%. Then we have the River Basin Authorities. They were supposed to address the issue of irrigation. How do we ensure that we have so much water? How do we harness it for agricultural production? And then we had DFRI, Directorate for Food, Road and Rural Infrastructure. The objective was to open the rural areas, create roads. Because food perish, cassava rots the farm. Because the farmers can't get them out of the farms. In some locations, the truck only comes to work. A truck comes to those villages maybe once in 2 weeks. Once your cassava can get onto the truck, cassava only has maximum 48-hour lifespan once you have protected it. So that's a big challenge. If we do well, the answer is no. And then you have the ADPs. I think this has been, to some extent, successful with the various programs we've done, the Fadama 1, Fadama 2, and Fadama 3. How do we really, but what is the impact? While they have done well, what is the impact? One question my wife keeps asking me that all these billions in agriculture, the price of food has not gone down. And I said, well, we should be happy that the price of food is not going up and that it is still available. It means that some progress has been made, but the impact is not yet substantial. I think that, so let me talk about another problem we have is funding for agriculture. In Nigeria, it says 2% of total bank lending goes to agriculture. I saw a data last week, another report that says now 3.9%. Honestly, I don't believe it. That's 3.9. I will explain when I show you some figures why I don't think it's 3.9. Because at the time it was 2%, and now 3.9. I'm really asking myself what has really changed. Now, but in Kenya, the smaller economy is 6%. So you can see the difference. That's why they are probably more advanced or have food security than we are. So what are the reasons for low funding of agriculture? One, lack of understanding of agribusiness. The truth is this: if at an executive level you don't understand the business, you're not likely to approve it. That's the problem with the banks. At the executive levels, you don't understand agriculture. And once you have a situation where one loan goes bad, you just like, no, that it's a high risk area. We don't even go there. In March 2011, CBN sent a memo to all the banks. We must set up an Agric desk. The desk must be headed by a DGM or a GM with a background in agriculture. And you must have two main departments that report to the GM that looks at production and looks at processing. I'm not sure that any bank has that structure as of today. On the first bank, which is the biggest bank, the head of agriculture, there's a principal manager. So, because the reason is that if the head of agriculture is at an executive level, you'll be able to make an impact when the decisions are being made. That no, you're looking at this. When it's a junior person, it's really very little that the person can do. So we had a big challenge that I was at a training and there were bankers on agriculture, and I asked one of them, what do you do? So I do agricultural, I do project monitoring. And I asked, do you have a background in agriculture? And he said, no. So what do you monitor? I said, no, I only do fish. we are checking the fish, water quality, and what's it called? It still doesn't make him an expert because it's not his area. I mean, for a farmer who has an intention to default, will know the games to play, that he will not know what is happening. That is the reality. So we have that problem of understanding the agricultural business. We have high risk. I mean, so the farmer, they say no, there's high risk. I won't mention, there's an exposure of about 5 billion to one of the biggest projects in this country. And I realized that when the banks actually gave this money, there was no due diligence done. It was a political lending because there were 5 banks involved. They wanted to keep the FAC, the JAR, the VAT account. And then this loan is bad. And they said, no, agriculture is high risk because they did not do what they were supposed to do. In terms of skills, the people managing the farms, excellent skills. But management and implementation, wrong. Complex nature of agriculture, high transaction costs, and low profit margin. So that's how the banks view agriculture. And that's why there's no funding for the agricultural sector. So let's take this. We're going to look at the various CBN intervention in agriculture, which are these SGSF, 3 billion naira total exposure. If you've given out 3 billion and over 50% is bad, and you are requesting CBN to look, I want your guarantee. Can you pay me back? And CBN only pays 242 million out of 1.5, but they really want to go to bank. So to some extent, you can't blame the banks when you have this kind of situation. It's, they've lost money, and also I think it's the implementation of the ECGSF itself, because a lot of the farmers. A lot of the people they gave money to are not real farmers. There were people who said, look, this is my own share of the national cake, since they were distributing. But interesting enough, when I joined First Bank in 1990, as an Agric officer, I wasn't doing lending. We were doing recovery of 5,000 naira that was given out then. I mean, 5,000 naira was a whole lot of money. But we were chasing farmers. I mean, I remember you put on your truckers, and because when the farmer sees you, or the person is exactly to take off, so you have to run and chase him to collect this money. So that's a big challenge. You have exposure on that Agric credit support scheme, which is about 50 billion. You have commercial Agric credit scheme, 199 billion, and NISA 7 billion. If you take a whole lot of things, there's about 260 billion that's been advanced for agriculture in Nigeria. Now look at this. 3 billion. That 3 billion is really what went to small scale farmers. That means that 257 billion went to large scale farmers. The question is, where is this money? What did they do with the money? Cassava, rice, and fish. Why? Because rice and fish seems to be what we spend a lot of money importing into this country. So we can reduce, if we increase production for rice, we can increase production for fish to reduce the amount of imports that we have right now. So, and what is going to happen, for everybody who sets up a processing plant in the processing zone, you get some form of protection. So you can see that right now, fish is being restricted. All the fish importers now have quotas. You cannot just bring in anything. And you can see, because we are bringing in anything, there are a lot of cases of spoiled fish in the market. So we have restrictions so that we can allow the local producers to actually. There's also a challenge with that. We've specialized in catfish, and not everybody eats catfish. So how do we develop competencies for people to grow other types of fish within the country? Also, there's going to be tax rebates for anybody who's producing within the processing zone. So Lagos State right now is looking for anybody who's going to produce feed mill, floating feed mill, because they have those large estates, and every feed mill is imported. We can produce locally at a competitive price. Why not? They're ready to provide. I think they said they have about 8 hectares they're ready to give to anybody who's going to produce at K2. So this is, the agricultural transformation agenda for me looks at the complete value chain. How do we address the input issues all the way to production, to processing, and to marketing? So what are the issues that we need to really deal with? How do we deal with the issues of soil maintenance and quality retention? It's a major problem. If we're going to produce arable crops, we must look at the issue of our soil. How do we maintain quality? How do we solve the challenges of inputs, especially appropriate technology to make mechanization affordable to the average farmer? Also, how do we deal with the issues of lending to small-scale farmers to increase their capacity and also to improve their production quality? The local farmer will never have the kind of collateral banks are looking for. That is the reality. How do we deal with it? How do we use, is it the microfinance banks that are going to be empowered to be able to on-lend to them? Can the banks work with the ADPs to lend to the, because the ADPs have worked successfully with these farmers. Can they make the ADPs maybe project managers to help them monitor? I mean, I believe that banks need to be more creative about lending to this sector, or else it'll just be mouth, just talk. Also, how do we ensure that the agricultural transformation is implemented and sustained, even if there's a change of minister or administration achievable? Because we're not going to solve this problem overnight. It's a continuous thing, but we must have a plan that works to solve it. Also, how do we encourage more local and foreign investments in the agricultural sector? I guess that, the stable crop processing zone concept will address that, because like Cargill is setting up a factory and is also acquiring a farm, although using outgrowers. So it's encouraging people to come in with various tax rebates that are going to be given to them. So to conclude, I'll just say that agriculture is a profitable business because there's a large population to feed. The organizer was speaking and she was talking about a project, and I said that she will start with Lagos. I said, why do you don't even need to go outside Lagos. There are 18 million people there to feed. So Lagos is already talk less of the remaining over another 150 million. So there's a huge population to feed, and food is important. There's availability of resources. The land is there. Labor is available. So also existing technology makes room for good agricultural practices. Whatever is available, whatever we're reported, still makes room for good practices. Also, food safety management systems can be guaranteed through these agricultural practices, good storage and processing facilities. That is what's it called. We need to really spend a lot of time on in terms of research, processing and storage. There's a state government that I'm talking to, they started building, they give a contract to someone to build a yam conditioning plant. And the thing is abandoned. And they're looking at how do we research it. They call the guy back, and the guy is asking for more money. After they had another government had fully paid him. He didn't finish the project, he's now asking for more money. And they're looking at, look, can we get somebody who will work with us, PPP, complete it, and run the place? Storage is something that we need to really address. Also, the current agricultural transformation supports and encourages production. I think it does.
You were praising the efforts of the government and giving up fertilizers. Here's my question. Why are we so eager to give up fertilizers to farmers? Well, there's nothing wrong with our soil. Now, we have not covered the acreage we have. We have large arable land that we haven't farmed. The soil is rich, very fertile, or fertilizer. Now I know that the fertilizers that they use gives increased yield in the first few years. Afterwards, it damages the soil. And there's repeated problems with the local farmers who aren't able to produce anymore from their land because of the used fertilizers. And my point is that we're using fertilizers when we don't need to use fertilizers. That's one question. Secondly, talking about in your great presentation, by the way. However, we left the issue of logistics and transportation. And I think that when we're talking about food prices, increased food prices, food inflation hitting the agricultural sector, we forget about the issues of logistics and transportation. I'll give you an example. There was a report, was it 2 weeks ago, on tomatoes, for instance, that 40% of tomatoes gets wasted being transported to Lagos. Now, we're using old rickety transport vehicles that have been used since the 70s, 60s, 70s. Now, in England, to deliver groceries from Tesco's or Waitrose to my house, you use a refrigerated truck. Now, what stops us from using refrigerated trucks, the long big ones, to transport tomatoes from the north to the south? agree that the trains are not in operation right now. Now, if we did that, think about adding a 40% back, or even 30% back into the tomato market. The prices will be considerably reduced, because the woman who's lost 40% of her produce will not suddenly forget that she has to now charge the entire price on the 60%. So that's another point I felt that you did not delve into, and I think that's an important point. Now, I know everybody's praising Atta. I will agree from a concept perspective. It's great. I give them that. But like everything in Nigeria, there's been great problems with implementation. My problem is that we sing so much praise about Atta. The amount of money as a nation, is our Commonwealth, that's been pumped into Atta, has not been any corresponding reduction in prices. Economics says that if you have pumped so much money, production will have increased, and if production has increased, and demand remains stable, the price must have come down. But instead, we're seeing inflation go off the roof, we're seeing importation go off the roof. So I ask, what's this so great about this Atta? Is it because it looks good on paper, or is it actually, yielding results?
Okay, let me give him the opportunity to at least take the first and second question.
Okay. Soil. This is the problem of soil. I mean, there's the fertilizer angle of it, but there's also the issue of our own soil, which I mentioned earlier on, that the topsoil here is between 12 inches and 18 inches. By the time you plow once, twice, thrice, you've lost the topsoil. So that is a challenge. And then what I'm saying, I also had mentioned that research needs to be done on how do we deal with the soil issue. We're not spending money on research. And either the government will not do that research. We expect that the universities or the research institutes to work on them. They don't get adequate funding. That is a challenge. So, I mean, when you look at the FAO rates soil quality low to medium in Nigeria, which influences the need for fertilizer, that we like it or not. The issue is that how much fertilizer?
What types of
fertilizer? What types of fertilizer? Must we use just NPK?
NPK, thank you.
You understand? So I mean, that's where research comes to play. And that's why I'm saying that we can't continue to spend 3% of our budget on agriculture. We need to increase it so that more money can go into research to address this key issue. Because look, I agree with you that the ATA is fantastic. The problem we have in Nigeria, we always have good schemes. Implementation is a challenge. I think that implementation is on course. That's why I'm saying that we need to find a way of ensuring that this is not derailed by either a new minister or a new administration. That there's sustainability. Let's even have a program that we can follow through for the next 10, 15 years. Not that every 4 years we're changing programs. Talking about logistics, it's a big challenge. You're talking about tomato, cassava rots because there are logistics problems. I mean, I also know that under NISAL and the ATA, there's supposed to be an interaction with state governments, local governments, and federal that local governments create earth roads to the farms. Some support for them to do earth roads to the farms. The state government should do their own intra-state roads that come out, and federal government has responsibility for major highways that they can that interaction to make sure that foods don't get spoiled. They can live where they're produced into the because once the farmers are sure that they can get their goods out, they will increase their production. But that challenge is there. Government will not buy refrigerated vehicles. I think it will be private people who will go into that business. But no private person will invest in logistics when you don't have access roads. But when you deal with that problem, the staple crop processing zones, when it's ready, if it's fully implemented, I mean the World Bank and the AFDB already provided $1 billion, so I expect that work should start. If within a 30-kilometer radius, there's access road to those what's called, that will have solved. I mean, 30 kilometers is a wide radius that farmers in those will have access roads. Because for all those zones, I mean, I was one of the financial consultants on the staple crop processing zone working with the Mahindra group in India. The master plan is such that there's accessibility. The plan includes roads that lead to the processing zone. So you can have, once that is, you can solve that. They're starting with 6. There are going to be more zones. But let's even start with 6. Let's implement it. Let's see it work before we start to do. I mean, some state governments are fighting. No, you must do it in my state. Initially it was supposed to be 16, but don't let's do too many things at the same time. We'll just abandon projects all over the place. Let's take 6, flog it, let it be successful, and then we can go into other projects. The truth is that there cannot be a perfect answer to these problems, but we just have to keep trying.